Hi, welcome to this video. I'm Niels Agort and I work for the Cloud Platform Business Unit at VMware. In a previous video, we talked about the vMotion process and what happens when you initiate that process. In this video, we will focus on what is happening once the vMotion process, once a live migration is actually active and working. So vMotion is mostly memory-centric, and once a vMotion process is started, it's all about copying memory from the source ESXi host to the destination ESXi host. If we focus on memory writes, what we typically have on the source ESXi host is that virtual machine and the guest running inside the virtual machine. Now, this is writing memory to the local host memory. But when a vMotion is running, we need to keep track on what memory pages are overwritten. So whenever a virtual machine is being live migrated, this is a no-go. Memory is put on in read-only. We have a thing called a guest exit from the virtual machine and the guest to the VMM process. In the previous video, we talked about the VMM process, and it basically owns the page tables in memory for that source ESXi host for that virtual machine. Now, the VMM process will change the memory from read-only to read-write. And it will go ahead and write that page to memory. But simultaneously, it will call out the kernel module, which is where the vMotion process basically operates. Now, in this VM kernel module, the migration module, the memory page is marked as being dirty. That means that that memory page is overwritten. And because it is dirty, we now need to write that memory to the destination host itself as well. So we have the memory in the destination, on the destination ESXi host. And because it is marked as being dirty, we now need to resend that using the vMotion network. So this is how we keep track of all the memory pages. And there is a process which I would like to discuss, which is the precopy, the iterative precopy process. And that is all about how we transfer that memory to the destination ESXi host. So let's talk about the iterative memory precopy process. Now, what we are doing is that we start checking the memory pages that reside on the source ESXi host and compare them versus the memory pages that already are copied or replicated to the destination ESXi host. So what we will do is we will sequentially check all the memory pages on the source and check them against the memory pages on the destination host. This is done sequentially. Now, the VMM process will ask if we can terminate the precopy phase, which basically means that we have reached memory convergence, meaning we have all the memory pages that are on the source ESXi host, and those are copied, replicated to the destination ESXi host. So VMM will ask if we can terminate precopy. This is done by VMM, like I just said. To determine whether we can terminate this process is basically ask ourselves a question if the last iteration, because this is an iteration that goes on and on until all the pages are copied, okay? So once we see that we have the migration text and the last iteration can fit in 500 milliseconds, we will terminate the process. But to do so, to determine if we can do so, we need to check the migration tags. Now, the migration tags consists of metrics that are all about what is the transmit rate. Transmit rate in what, so basically what speed are we copying memory pages. It is also about the dirty rate. So we talked about the dirty page, and once memory pages get overwritten, it's marked as dirty. So at what speed is the guest inside the virtual machine dirtying the memory pages? And what are the pages left for transmissions? So these metrics are basically altogether the migration tags. Like I said, can we terminate this process? We need to keep the last iteration within 500 milliseconds. If the answer is no, then we will go ahead and start the next iteration. If the answer is yes, then after the last iteration, we will now go to VMM and asking that, or basically executing that we can now terminate the precopy process. So now we determine that we can terminate this process, right? We just mentioned that if the answer is no, we will do a next iteration. Answer is yes, we will terminate this process. Now, what happens if we terminate this process? Basically, it means that VMM is talking to VMX, the VMX process, which we discussed in a previous video, that we can now move on from the precopy phase to the switchover phase. Now, the switchover phase is all about basically a quick suspend and resume operation. So VMX is now told to terminate the precopy phase, and it will move to the checkpoint phase. So VMM now suspends the VM. It will then send over the checkpoint data to the destination host. And this is basically information that the ESXi host, the destination ESXi host needs to boot the VM on the destination host. So when the VM is booted, it's pointed to the checkpoint data. And the checkpoint data is all about the VM, and we basically have an interrupted boot process of that VM on the destination side. So it knows to look for that checkpoint data that is just transferred from the source to the destination ESXi host. And it now knows what memory pages to look for. And once it does so, it will continue like it did on the source ESXi host. This whole process will take less than a second, depending on workload and depending on stress of that workload on the virtual machine and the compute resources. So this is what happens when you have a vMotion process and from a memory copy perspective. Thank you for watching.